Hi, everybody, and hello, Loretta. We are back for episode 4. We have had the most incredible feedback so far about the first 3 episodes we've put out. So, anyone listening to this, if you haven't listened to the first 3, please take a listen. And we just love getting the feedback. So, we're going to get stuck in today to another juicy topic. What do we mean by unconscious beliefs and coping mechanisms? How are they formed and how do they make us sick? So we did already touch on this in episode 2 when we talked about the missing link in your healing. But we want to explore them in more detail today. And why? And that's because understanding the information we're going to bring you today, if you're sick and you want to help yourself heal, no matter what else, what other healing modality you do, this information we're bringing to you, you really need to embed it and know it as the foundation and the knowledge step to what you need to do next to become your own healer from the inside out. And I'm saying this on good authority because I had read this stuff. I'd heard this information probably for at least 10 years before I got cancer, but only when I got diagnosed with the stage 4 aggressive cancer did I pay attention to what we are going to tell you today. So if you're sick, I highly encourage you to listen to this episode 20 times if you need to just really understand this and take it on, because without this knowledge and integrating it into your healing journey, it's very unlikely that you're going to do more than scratch the surface on your healing, physical and mental. And of course, they go together. And if you jump onto our YouTube or onto our email, you are also very welcome to ask us questions. If there's anything you don't understand, or ask us to explain anything more in a short clip or another episode. So let's get stuck in. So I'm going to start off by quoting Freud. Freud compared our human minds to an iceberg. He said that about 1/10 of our mind, that is 10% of our whole mind, is the tip of the iceberg. The rest, as in 90%, is submerged underneath the water. So as such, it's unconscious. So 10% of our mind, if we can put it very simply, is what Freud would have termed conscious. So this is the visible, known part of our psyche. It's what we call our rational mind or our intellect. And it's incredible how many of us think that this is it. But, and this is a big but, actually, the part that's submerged, the unconscious, 90%, that is actually the deep driver of our behavior. And this is unknown to us. That's why it's called unconscious. So actually, only a fragment of yours and mine and every human being's ideas and feelings are actually conscious to them. The vast bulk of our mental content, is actually unconscious, or it's invisible to us until we make it visible. So I'm just going to say it one more time. For me, really understanding this was an absolutely critical key which turned the lock for me to start helping heal myself. I had no idea to what extent my invisible, unknown, unconscious beliefs, coping mechanisms, and thoughts were running my show. But Grace brought to me a Bruce Lipton clip. Now, I'd gone through Bruce Lipton's books and work many times before I got cancer. But when you're faced with a stage 4 galloping aggressive cancer that's sitting at the top of your spine, it's incredible how much more attention you pay to things. So So Loretta's laughing, but it's true. And I'm not judging anybody, because I was one of those people that never paid attention till the stakes were really high. So Bruce Lipton put forward this model of this iceberg that Freud talked about, but he explained it in this way. He said that the 90% is a program that runs our show, and this program is in place by the age of 6 or 7 years old. This program is determined by our childhood, our upbringing, our socialization, our conditioning, and our trauma plays a big role. And this program is fully in place by 7 years old. Now, this you can look up in neuropsychology, neuroscience psychology. This is a fact. So who we are at 7 is who we are for the rest of our life, unless we reprogram that program. It's like any program, like your computer program. It's going to run your show until you change the program. So in other words, most of us, me included, 7 years ago, my program was unknowingly running my show, and my program was exceptionally faulty, also unknown to me. So on the 10% level, I presented as a spiritual, healthy, I mean, I had a lot of knowledge, but only when I saw this model and it really sunk in, I was like, oh my goodness, I wonder what's happening underneath that iceberg. So that started my journey of reprogramming my program, and that actually meant rewiring my brain. And that is a process. It's because it requires us to look at how deeply ingrained limiting beliefs could be running our show, toxic thought patterns, stress responses that we don't even know are stress. There's so much stuff that we're not consciously aware of that is running our show. And I had no idea. And if I had no idea after 30 years of self-help and spiritual reading and workshops, I'm quite sure there's a lot of people that, if they do know this, they haven't embodied it. So yeah, Loretta's also going to, when I hand over to her, I'm doing all the talking today. She's also, before she kicks off her section, she'll just tell us a little bit about how these limiting beliefs, and by the way, mine were a lot related to my own self, but they are also very toxic, ridiculous belief systems about things outside myself. And Loretta will explain to you a little bit how actually these don't change, but we can change our choices and we can work with them differently. We can do the work of physically healing, mentally healing, and spiritually healing, even with those underlying beliefs. I think that's what Loretta means. So the focus of almost everything we're going to bring to you in one way or another is actually about giving you tools, information, insights into how you can start making this unconscious stuff conscious, because we can't heal what we don't know. We are going to bring to you deep understanding, I hope, about this hidden program. And most of all, what we'd like to offer you is how to reprogram this program. And you might say, what has this got to do with my cancer or my physical illness? That's why I'm sitting here today listening to you. So Loretta's going to explain to you how this program, if it's not changed, how it physically affects our health. And therefore, if we can reprogram it, how we can help ourselves heal. So Loretta, after that very long introduction, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks, Antoinette. So our limiting beliefs, I believe, are the foundation actually of this unconscious, like if the 90% of the iceberg is submerged under the water, it's almost as if in my belief system, the limiting beliefs are the foundation of the bottom of the iceberg. Because when you understand that, you understand that a lot of the other beliefs that you have come out of those. So a limiting belief, we just want to be clear about definitions, because there's language can become problematic, because most of us think a limiting belief is something that limits us 100%. It's something that you believe that limits you. It keeps you trapped in fear. What I'm talking about are these foundational limiting beliefs, and those are the ones that we actually can't shift. So let me think of a belief that you could change. So let's just say that you have a belief about certain people. You may have a belief about money, that money is the root of all evil. That's a cultural inculcation, and actually you can have a realization that that's not necessarily true, and that's a belief that you can shift, because it's not one of these foundational beliefs that I'm talking about. It's a belief that comes as a consequence of a foundational belief, right? So when we use the terms limiting belief here, we're talking about those beliefs that form in the first 3 years of your life. And I 100%, I'm not going to argue with Bruce Lipton about the first 7 years. I think there's a saying, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I think in the Catholic churches, give me a child until they're 7. Because basically until they're 7, they're completely programmable, all right? And so until we're 7, our brain is completely malleable. When we're very young, that front part of our brain, when we're born, those first couple months of our lives, the front part of your brain, your neocortex, the part of your brain that's involved with logic and foresight and forward thinking, it's busy developing. And so those neural networks are all being informed by your environment, by what's going on around you, by what you hear people say, by the attitudes that your parents have. Now, here's the thing about these foundational limiting beliefs is that they develop in response to an unmet need or trauma. So when babies are born, they have no view of reality, right? Because they have no memory of ever having been here. So even if you believe in reincarnation, a newborn baby has no memory of being on Earth and has no frame of reference other than itself, because it's all it knows, right? And so babies tend to process everything that happens around them relative to themselves. So what that means is if your mother is incredibly stressed because you're her first baby and she doesn't know what she's doing and she doesn't have enough support, and maybe she's got postnatal depression, or maybe there's a huge amount of money stress, or maybe there's stress in her relationship with the father or the partner, whoever else is in the house, and every time your mother comes to you, you perceive this anxiety that radiates off her. As a baby, you'll translate that into meaning something about you. She's distressed because I am not enough, or unworthy, or not perfect, or not in control, or I'm essentially the cause of that stress. And when you cannot regulate that for her, because of course you can't, then you judge that as being something wrong with you. So when you then have a need that's unmet, and this can be as simple as you're left to cry for longer than is comfortable for you when you wake up with from your nap because your mom, I don't know, is in the bathroom and she can't come immediately, all right? The baby doesn't have a sense of why she's not coming. All the baby translates as, she's not coming, it must be because there's something wrong with me. So that's what I mean by an unmet need. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic. It can just be something relatively small. And what happens is that baby then develops a belief about themselves, a belief about other people, and a belief about the world. And that becomes a fragment of their reality. So our sense of self as being a completely autonomous, separate human being is only fully developed by the time we're 3. And actually, I think it's in the anthroposophical belief system, they say that the soul is only fully incarnated in the child when the adult teeth come through, which is at about 7, which ties in with what Bruce Lipton says about the programming before 7, okay? So effectively what happens is when we have unmet needs, and it doesn't matter how attentive your parents are, there's no way that they can meet every single need that you have. It's impossible. So this is not about blaming or shaming your parents to say, well, my parents didn't meet my need and therefore I have this limiting belief. If you had the most enlightened parents on the earth, you would have unmet needs. And in response to those unmet needs, you would develop a limiting belief. And you would develop that belief about yourself, and then you'd have a belief about other people relative to that. So it might look something like, I'm unworthy, nothing I do is good enough for others, or others' needs matter more than mine. And if that's true, and what would that say about the world? Well, I don't know, the world is unpredictable. The world is unsafe, maybe. And that becomes a fragment of your map of reality. And by the time you're 3, you've worked out how the world works. And you've worked out how the world works and how you need to operate in the world in order not to be rejected, based on the cues that you've taken from the people that have taken care of you. And so the issue with these limiting beliefs, these foundational limiting beliefs, is that once you have them, because babies are so helpless, if babies get rejected, they die. So that part of your brain, your amygdala that processes all that emotion, basically says, if you have a belief about yourself, I'm unworthy, let's say, it says, if the caregiver discovers the truth, you will be rejected. And should you be rejected, you will die. It creates a huge amount of anxiety, right? And so what ends up happening is we learn to hide it and to compensate for it. And this is what we call a coping mechanism. So, for example, the baby whose mom is incredibly stressed, that first example that I used, she's really stressed. She's a first-time mom. She doesn't have enough support. There's not enough money. She's really, really stressed. That baby might have a belief of, I'm unworthy. And because she's always so stressed, the baby then compensates by being good, trying to create as little stress for her as possible, not crying, not being demanding, okay? And as that child grows into a toddler, becomes better behaved, the kind one, the one who always cares about, are you okay, mom? Like, that, all right? And so that becomes a coping strategy or a coping mechanism. And then what happens is your coping mechanism gets validated because your mom says, this is my angel, my earth angel child, so kind, so caring, looks after his or her siblings, right? And every time someone goes, you are an amazing person because you're kind, you start identifying with kind. Now, none of this is a problem until what ends up happening is you have a part of this unconscious, that part of the submerged iceberg says, if they find out that you're not kind, they'll find out that you're unworthy. So you have to compensate for this belief that you're unworthy for the rest of your life. In fact, the purpose of your life is to fix this, which then means that kind no longer becomes a choice. Kind becomes a compulsion. You have no choice other than to be kind. Now, if you're kind and people take advantage of it, because one of the things of kindness is that you don't say no, you say yes to everyone. You're always the person who's there to help. And I'm not knocking kindness, right? It's just that when you start being kind at the expense of yourself, of your own inner peace, of your own physical endurance, of your emotional capacity, because you just cannot stop doing that, what you then do is you activate that part of your nervous system that's stress-induced. And so unconsciously, you have the stress of, I can never be cruel. I can never be cruel, which means I cannot say no. What if they find out that I'm not always kind, then I'm going to be in big trouble, all right? Because essentially I'm going to be rejected because I am intrinsically unlovable because of whatever that thing is that I believe about myself. So I'm unworthy is the most common limiting belief. Many people have that. It's the most common one, right? And then there are a whole host of others, and we'll do a whole recipe. I said a recipe. We'll do a whole episode. We'll do a whole episode on the limiting beliefs and their compensatory strategies, their coping mechanisms, because it's worth knowing. So here's the thing. There's nothing wrong necessarily with a belief or even with a coping mechanism, except that you don't have any power over it and it starts running your life. So another one is, another coping mechanism is to be good, is to be an achiever, is to be good at things, is to get it right, or to be independent. And so the high achiever is always setting the bar higher, can never rest on their laurels, always have to do better. If they don't get an A, then they're not doing well enough. So that now, I'm one of those. I have that as a strategy. And I just used to think that I was an ambitious A-type person until I was in therapy in my 40s. And the therapist said, you're a person who's highly functional with a lot of anxiety. I was like, what? I don't have anxiety. I help people regulate their anxiety. What is this woman talking about? Fortunately, I'd been with her for a long time. I trusted her. So I went off and I thought about that. I was like, my goodness, she's actually right. Okay, what I call high functioning or ambitious or an A type, or, I'm just one of those people who gets things done. Haha. The truth is, I'm so compelled to do that because I have an underlying anxiety that I'm not even aware of. I'm not even aware that it's anxious, that it's anxiety, that is actually running the show. And it's when we're blind to that. You see, if these limiting beliefs, if their coping strategies were just disastrous, we'd all see them and we go, this is disastrous, not serving my life at all. I'm not going to do this. But because we get validated for them, and because they don't always look disastrous, and in fact, they always are incredibly rational and logical. So I'm going to give you an example. If I think I'm one of those people who, when the pawpaws strike in the fan, I've got to go in there and keep everyone calm and sort it out, right? Then my rational mind says, well, everyone was hysterical. Of course, they needed someone who was calm to go in there and sort it out. Makes perfect sense. 100%. And because it's rational, these strategies are rational. They're not irrational. Sometimes they seem a bit irrational when they're obstructive. But you know what? By and large, they're actually not. They seem to make perfect sense. And because they make perfect sense, we're happy to keep on doing them. And because we get validated for them, we're even more happy to go on doing them. And because we start identifying with personality traits that we develop because of them, they don't seem to be problematic until something happens and you become aware of this and you're like me, oh my goodness, here I thought I was just an A-type personality. I'm half Italian. We're quite fiery. We like to get things done. We like to be bossy, la, 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 la. Actually, that's not entirely the truth. The truth is I have a limiting belief of not being good enough. And I have a strategy of always having to be the best at something, which makes me competitive, which makes me a very A-type person, which has allowed me to achieve enormous things, which has got me enormous validation. Not bad, but what it's also done is it's created huge stress, massive underlying stress. So by the time I was in my late 20s, I had incredibly high blood pressure. I'm thinking about it now. This is probably where it came from. I didn't think about it then because I didn't know this then, right? But that is part of what can drive something like high blood pressure. It's the pressure, literally, that I put myself under in order to get things right. So this is how those limiting beliefs, when we're not aware of them and we're not aware of the strategies, we just say, this is how I am. We just go, I'm this kind of person. This is my personality. This is just how I am. Well, yes, it might just be how you are, but it's how you are because of what it is that you believe about yourself. And once you realize that, you don't suddenly lose all of this. I mean, I didn't, when I got this, become someone who just wanted to lie on the couch all day. But what I did realize was how often I push myself beyond my limits, how often I don't rest, how often I don't take the time out, and how not doing those things that serve me, because God forbid that I shouldn't be busy and productive, because if I'm not busy and productive, my little girl me says, if we're not busy and productive, they're going to find out we're not good enough. And if they find out we're not good enough, we're not going to be loved and we're going to be rejected and no one's going to want us. So what I mean by we can transcend them, as what Antoinette said, is that we can use this knowledge not to change the belief, but we can recognize it's the belief, and then we can recognize it's the coping mechanism that's as a consequence of the belief. And then we can choose, is doing this in my best interests right now? So if I go back to my example of being a really kind person and saying yes to everyone, if you're overworked because everyone at work, when they need something done, they ask you because you're the reliable one who will get it done. If at home, you're the one who takes care of everyone's needs. If your pattern or your strategy or your coping mechanism is to put everyone else first and you last, and you know this now, and then someone says, could you bake 10 dozen cupcakes for the cake sale tomorrow at school because someone let me down? And your automatic response is, yes, of course I will, when actually you don't really have the time or the resource. Antoinette's putting up her hand. You can choose. You can say, is this going to serve me? All right. Why am I doing this? Because if it's what it's going to do is make you sick, or like it's going to burn you out, or it means you're not going to sleep and you're going to be even more exhausted tomorrow. Maybe it would make more sense to say, I'd love to help you, but I just cannot. I actually cannot. So, and it's hard. I just want to mention this. If this was easy, we'd all be doing it. We'd go like, oh, this is my limiting belief. This is my strategy. Just going to stop doing my strategy now. No. Because as the coping mechanism or the coping strategy is what you're comfortable with. It's what you've always done. It's what you know. And so that even if it's not serving you, it's what you're comfortable doing. And saying no, for example, when you are a people pleaser, can be incredibly difficult. And so in order to do that reprogramming, we need a lot of, we need to know what's going on, and we need to have our energy. I want to say our energy. Yeah, we need to take our power back from these things, because otherwise they run us on autopilot. And when we recognize them, we're like, okay, I'm going to stop having this run me. But every time in the beginning, when you want it to, like anything, when you start practicing it, it feels uncomfortable. It can feel difficult. That's why many people don't want to do this. They go, no, this is too difficult. I don't want to do this. And that's okay. It's not good or bad. It just is. It's just that if you keep on doing what you've always done, you're going to keep on getting what you've always gotten. And if what you've gotten is really sick, I would say that doing what you've always done is probably not a great idea if you want to get really well. It's okay if you want to stay sick or get different kind of sick. Okay. I mean, it's difficult to say this without sounding judgmental. I'm not. It's about, do you have a choice? Because most of us are being run on autopilot by this 90% that's happened of the iceberg that's submerged under the water. And one of the keys to healing is to make that conscious, because then you have a choice. You literally can choose, you know what, this is a great time for me to be kind. In fact, this is what I would love to do, and I have the resources to do it. And so I'm going to say yes. So you do. And you know what, if in a week's time, someone asks you to do something and you don't have the resource to do it, and you know that it's going to be to your detriment and to the detriment of everyone else, you're going to say, I'd love to, but sorry, I can't. So this is not about being one way or the other. In fact, what it does is when you recognize this and you start reprogramming, as Antoinette says, you open up a whole host of possibilities. You find parts of yourself that you didn't even know you had. And healing is not just about getting rid of your signs and symptoms. It's about integrating all the parts of yourself that you didn't even know necessarily were there, that you didn't even know were fragmented. So making that unconscious conscious is not that hard. It's just about knowing that it's there in the first place, which is what this episode's about. It's there. You can find it. You can make it conscious. And once you've made it conscious, it's not about changing it or changing who you are. It's about recognizing it and going, okay, well, does this serve me right now? Or does it not? Well, it doesn't. Okay, then I need a different mechanism. I need a different coping strategy. Carl Jung said, and if I remember my psychological history together, Carl Jung and Freud were contemporaries, right? And Jung was Freud was a mentor to Jung. And then they sort of diverged when Jung put the sort of spiritual into psychotherapy. But Jung said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we'll call it fate. Antoinette.
I just want to bring thank you, that was amazing. But I want to bring it back full circle to physical illness, because people who are listening to us by and large are probably very sick. So you might say, well, yeah, but what has this got to do with my cancer or my autoimmune disease or my diabetes? Well, actually, these unconscious beliefs, thoughts, and behaviors can and do make us sick. And psychoneuroimmunology is a relatively recent medical science that is proving this. So, and I keep on going back to science, although it's not Loretta's first go-to, because I think a lot of people like me in the past, we don't necessarily take things seriously unless they've been properly researched. So you can know for sure that your thoughts, feelings, your experiences create physiological responses in your body. They affect your body chemistry, your immune system, your hormones, and your overall well-being. And often symptoms play out in our bodies. I was one of those people for many, many years before we become chronically ill, or we get cancer, or we get the big one. So we might be feeling anxious. We might have thyroid problems. We might be restless. We might not be sleeping well. But I think the nature of our current modern life, or our life for a long time now as human beings, is that we tend to ignore those things and push through them. Because the other thing I wanted to add to what you said earlier is, I know from my own life, we often validated for coping mechanisms like being nice, being overkind. We validated for that from the outside, so we don't see them as dysfunctional coping mechanisms. I said on the Radical Remission podcast I spoke on, I was a very dysfunctional functional. So Gabor Mate's got an amazing book, and psychoneuroimmunology, and everything Loretta studied and will bring has proven. I mean, PNI is actually proving there's a cancer personality. Yeah. There's certain diseases that even shown are being related. I can't remember them offhand, but we're going to go into a lot of them, like being over strong, over people pleasing, being over nice, always being the rescuer, really can lead to certain types of specific illnesses. And they have actually come up with a cancer profile now. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will have cancer. So the reason we're going on and on about this, and we're going to keep on going on and on, is because cancer, autoimmune disease, diabetes, heart disease, and in fact, they're even showing back pain now and menopause are related to the chemistry of your body. Well, they are. And the chemistry of your body is going to be affected, yes, by your thoughts and your emotions, but that unconscious program that's driving your show with all these distorted belief systems and unconscious so-called great coping mechanisms. I mean, I was a well-liked, popular, successful person, but my goodness, all of that program running my show is what triggered my cancer. But if I'd seen the signs and symptoms, they were there already for 10, 15 years, because it can take up to 30 years, research is showing, but it is going to catch up with you. So if it has caught up with you and you are listening now, please, we're not judging. There is no judgment. It's not about us being upset with ourselves or our parenting or our past, but it's about knowing that once we know this, and once the unconscious becomes conscious and we see those parts of ourselves we never knew were there, or we didn't want to see, or we don't like, that really has been shown to lead to physical healing, to the point that some people actually have radical remissions in incurable cancers, for example, through changing some belief systems or toxic relationships. So, sorry, that was a bit of a ramble, but I wanted to make sure, listen, this is going to change your whole life, what we're talking about here, what Loretta's talking about. You don't have to have cancer. But unfortunately, a lot of people like me, we only end up going on this path when we get really broken open. And often that's through very severe illness. But it will change your life, this, and it will very likely lead to your physical healing. It's not a cure-all, but it's been shown now to definitely be the missing link. Although it's out there, it's not really out there. So we are going to really bring this to you over and over again. And Loretta works with people all the time. She helps people heal themselves through the stuff that we're bringing. She's an expert in it. She's been doing it a long time. And we're going to have some of the people that have healed through doing this kind of inner work, we're going to have them speak on the podcast so that you can know this is real. It's not just coming from some textbook. I'm a living example of it, but everybody's sick of my story. So we're going to bring in other people's stories, and particularly from Loretta's clients.
I just want to add to that, Antoinette. Thank you. These coping strategies are going to inform what you think, and they're going to inform what you feel, and they're going to inform the choices you make, which are ultimately going to lead to your habits. So, as a homeopath in private practice for 27 years, I had thousands of patients. And I said this, I think, on the intro, I can't remember, maybe on episode 1. I could never understand why people they would feel terrible. Then they'd do the intervention, they'd change their diet, take the medication, whatever was needed, change their lifestyle, and they'd feel great. And then somehow they'd fall off the wagon again. And what I've discovered is that the reason why that happens is because when we only change things on the outside, which is like our diet, our lifestyle, the supplements we take, the medications we take, the surgeries we have, all of that is, yes, you're doing it, it's happening to your body, but it's coming from outside. It's like an outside authority tells you eat this food. An outside authority tells you take this medicine, all right? I'm not knocking that. I'm not saying you don't need that. 100% you need that. But when we only do that, what we have to do is we have to use our willpower to change that in our lives. So if you weren't someone who had nutritious food, or you didn't move your body effectively, or whatever lifestyle thing you weren't doing that contributed to your illness, it takes discipline and willpower to change your habits. So you can change your habits for about 6 to 12 months. If you are a highly disciplined person, I would go as far as 12 months. But my experience is about 6 months is about the limit for most people. And you can use your will to override the programming for that period of time. But at some point, if you're not aware of the programming and you're not consciously choosing to change the coping strategy, you're going to revert to the programming. And that's why people struggle to stick to a healthy lifestyle. So some people who have got a high value on it stick to a healthy lifestyle, but they're in the minority. And what ends up happening is then we fall off the wagon and then we beat ourselves up because, it's our own fault because we've been eating too much sugar, or we haven't been exercising, or we haven't been hydrating, or we haven't been doing the sleep hygiene, or whatever it is. And what we do when we beat ourselves up because we can't stay on the health wagon is we activate our sympathetic nervous system. So we increase again that stress response. And just on a very sort of basic level, and I'm going to make a little bit of a short, I was going to say a longer short clip, a short clip on what happens to you physiologically, because really not everyone is interested in exactly what happens to you physiologically, but on a very, very basic level, you have a part of your nervous system called your autonomic nervous system, which runs literally all the automatic functions in your body. So it has an effect on your endocrine system. It has an effect on your immune system. It has an effect on your neurotransmitters. It has an effect on your hormones. That's your endocrine system. It has an effect on your digestive enzymes. It has an effect on how well your liver detoxifies. Where the cells die at the right time, where the cells reproduce at the right time, regulated by your autonomic nervous system. And your autonomic nervous system, when you are doing this compulsive behavior, the programming is running you and you feel like you're on the treadmill and you can't get off it. What happens is that the balance between the accelerator, which is your sympathetic nervous system, get things done, and the brake, which is your parasympathetic nervous system, calm things down, that balance between braking and accelerating doesn't work anymore. So instead of speeding up when you leave a traffic light, you're so exhausted, you slowly pull out of the intersection and all the cars around you are freaking out, which increases your anxiety. Or you're screaming along and suddenly there's a red light and you're like, brakes. So, or you're not driving in a cohesive kind of manner, accelerate when you need to accelerate, brake when you need to brake. That's how that autonomic nervous system keeps our physiology regulated. And so this is why we get sick, because of these things. So I don't believe we get sick because of negative thought. I must be quite honest. I don't think that we have the power to have 10 negative thoughts in a row and suddenly create something negative. I think that that's nonsense, quite frankly. We generate it by the repeated actions we take. And so if, let's just say genetically in my family, my father's a diabetic, my father was a diabetic. I can't think if there's anyone else. Oh, I have an auntie who was a diabetic. So there's diabetes in my family. If you've got a close family member who's a diabetic, you've got a 40% higher chance of developing diabetes genetically than someone who doesn't have a diabetic in their family. But you know what? If you don't eat tons of sugar and you're physically actually very active, you switch the genes off that regulate that diabetes pathway. Now, if you eat a lot of sugar and you're sedentary, and you know that there's diabetes in your family, but you're really struggling to get that lifestyle thing together, say part of the reason why you're struggling is not just because you don't have discipline. It's not just because you don't want to do the right thing. It's not just because you're a sugar addict. It literally is because of these unconscious programs that are running your show that you don't know about. And so diabetes, you don't generally wake up one morning and you're a diabetic. Type 2 diabetes happens when you're older. It happens as a consequence of a long period of time. And it's a long period of time of possibly physically not treating yourself well. But the question is, why would you not treat yourself well physically? Well, I'm telling you, if I'm unworthy or I'm not good enough or I need to be perfect, or any one of those limiting beliefs are running the show. Imagine this. If you intrinsically believe you're not worthy, why would you feed yourself well? Why would you look after yourself well? Because the truth is, you believe that you're not actually worth it. So, but if you don't know that, how are you going to change any of that? So that's my point about discipline. We can override these programs with discipline, but it usually only lasts for about 6 months. And then generally the lifestyle wheels fall off again. And this was one of the reasons why I actually went into studying this kind of thing, because I was like, I couldn't work out what the answer was. I was like, well, I don't know. Do I have to beat them into submission? Maybe if I'm scarier, they'll be, but you know what? If I was too scary, they just wouldn't come back. And I was scary. I can tell you that. They wouldn't come back, So I'm like, okay, so I've got to be nice enough to have them come back, but then I've got to be scary enough for them to stay on the bandwagon. And I realized it's not my job to keep them on the bandwagon. And why is it that we can't stay on the path of what's best for us? Not following a particular diet or just what's best for us. Mainly because the stuff that's sitting in our unconscious, our unresolved traumas, our suppressed emotions, and at the root of it all, those limiting beliefs and the coping mechanisms that we have because of them are running the show, and we don't know that they are.
I mean, we did mention this before, but on the back of what you've just said, what also happens, which was with me, I did maintain a very healthy lifestyle for a very long time on every level. But in fact, the limiting belief of not being good enough was making me a control freak, an absolute person, absolutely this, absolutely that. So I got onto this absolutism path of it absolutely has to be vegetarian, organic this, organic that. So although I was ticking all the right boxes, so I somehow did stay on that path. It was high value enough to me. I still got cancer because of the internal stress that was running my show, the people pleasing, codependency, and toxic beliefs per se maybe can't create illness, but I think they do create some chemistry in our body if they're repetitively always there, beating up on yourself or judging other people or so yeah, it's very multifaceted, this, and it sounds maybe overwhelming and scary and all that, but actually it's a very exciting journey to go on. It's not it's simple actually, but it's not easy, and it takes time and repetitive practice, and that's what we're going to keep on saying over and over, even if you're bored with it. And it takes tools and it takes good help. So we're going to bring you so much of that. So because we'd like to walk this path with you. And so thank you for being here. And Loretta, thank you for showing up for this, because I honestly have said since the day I met you, and I really mean this, I think that you should be a very well-known person in this field because you're exceptional. There aren't many people like you. So the people getting to listen to this now, take advantage before she gets very famous.
Thanks, Antoinette. So I think in closing, we just want to say thank you for being here. And I just want to reiterate what Antoinette said. We might talk about unresolved childhood traumas and suppressed emotions, and it might sound like you need 20 years of therapy. Honestly, there are a couple of fundamental, simple things you need to know that literally can change your life. And once you know them and you start applying them, it's not rocket science. It's a bit like, I don't know, running 5Ks. You get an app, tells you walk 2 minutes, run 1 minute, walk 2 minutes, run 1 minute. You do that for a couple times a week, and then it tells you to start running a bit more and walking a bit less. And eventually, after 12 weeks, you can run 5 kilometers. Maybe not like an Olympic gold medalist, but you don't need to do it like an Olympic gold medalist. You just need to do it like you. And so you need to do what's best for you, and you can discover what that is by first uncovering what's going on in the submerged part of the iceberg. And again, it's not, you don't have to find 25,000 things. You need 2 or 3 simple things revealed. And then the job is to actually just turn on the app, metaphorically, put on your walking or your running shoes and getting yourself out on the track for, I don't know, a couple minutes every day, half an hour, whatever it is, until eventually you can run the 5Ks. Like anything, just takes a bit of practice. But you don't know what you don't know, right? And so what we want to do is we want you to start knowing what we think you might not know. Maybe you know it. Maybe there's some of it you know, and maybe there's just one little thing that you didn't know. And that one little thing is the thing that can actually make the change. So as Antoinette says, please don't be scared. Please don't be intimidated. It's not going to take 25 years for you to heal. You're not going to have to do, I don't know, 5 years of navel gazing before anything changes. I'm a very practical, you know what, if we can't practically do something, then that's not something that we need to worry about. It's like, what are the things that we can actually affect? What are the things that we can change? And there are a few simple things that when you start recognizing them and you start applying them, then things can start changing dramatically. So I look forward to
the gift. Yeah, that's the gift you bring. Sorry, Loretta, if I can just add, it does take time. It's not a quick fix. It takes commitment. It takes some courage. And for some of us, it takes longer than others. But there is no other way, actually, if you want to live a good life, never mind heal. And with Loretta, I'd say you can short circuit a lot of hours of research and experimentation, because I took my own path. I never had a Loretta in my life then. And I know that as soon as I found the right tools and processes, it doesn't necessarily change things overnight, but it gives you a way of dealing with things. And that in itself is just massive, massive for our healing physically, mentally, and spiritually. So the way we've structured this podcast, just to reiterate, is that these deep dives, as we're calling them, like today, are to go into, in the beginning, information that we feel is really important, because you need to know what you don't know. Otherwise, there's no starting point. And then we're going to start making them more applied. Like Loretta will talk about organ energetics or specific diseases with specific mental things. But what we're doing over and above these is 2 types of short clips. The one is tools. We haven't done any tools yet, but we're going to soon. And those will be short, easy to listen to tools. And the other short clips will just give short bites of information. I've done one on hidden stress. The next one, the episode after this, Loretta's going to do more what actually happens in the physiology of your body with what we're talking about. So I think it's quite a nice structure, because even if you don't have time for a deep dive, there are going to be tools, and all the tools and info can actually be dived into in any sequence. I think it's
yeah.
So yeah, we're delighted to have you here, and please share this if you love it and it's helpful, because really our motivation and inspiration is to help people, actually.
Absolutely.